Police officers in the United States of America are often predators towards children. This is a Washington Post article released just 4 days ago about a police officer in Louisiana whose name is Rodney Vicknair, who essayed a 14-year-old who had already been assaulted, who had already been violated. This is a common occurrence that happens in the United States, and I have a personal story to show you to emphasize the point. And as you can see, Rodney Vicknair, who is 53 years old at the time, essayed someone who's under the age of 18, just 14 years old. And as the Washington Post has pointed out here, Americans have pointed out the misdeeds of clergy members, teachers, and coaches, and others who have access to children, but nobody wants to talk about the predators with badges, the law enforcement officers who often prey on people who are under the age of 18, women, and people who are generally vulnerable. And the Washington Post looked into this. I tried to tell people for freaking years now, there's a problem with U.S. law enforcement being predators. Well, the Washington Post is now backing me up along with a bunch of other scientists. And if you want to understand the problem, you're talking about 1,800 plus officers charged with crimes involving kids. We're not talking about the adults who are being essayed by officers. We know that's a whole issue by itself. You have driving while black, but you also have driving while female, which is actually in scientific literature. There are actually acronyms for this called PSV, or police sexual violence. PSV. And 1,800 plus officers charged through 2005 all the way up until 2022. 13 to 15 were the ages of the victims in most of those cases. Wow. And 90% of the victims were not reported to be related to the accused officers. So these are not relatives. These are officers who oftentimes became police officers for the express purpose of being a predator. And if you don't believe that, well, I had a young lady reach out to me on TikTok recently who was the victim of a former police officer in Kentucky whose name is David Roy Love. He was essaying this person for a long time. This man is no longer with us. He passed away. But the victim is still here, and the police and some of the adults involved were responsible for what this man did, for the fact that he got away with it for so long. And I want you to see his picture so that you understand how serious this problem is, because I'm going to show you some messages that I've censored so that I can protect the victim, so that you can see I didn't just make this up. And for the purposes of this video, I will call this person Susan. Susan told me that this man, even though she's clearly under the age of 18, wanted her to have a child. And that if she did have that child, that he may or may not violate them. That's how sick this got. And you would think the police would be forthcoming, right? Well, it turns out that when her youth leader, because some of the abuse was happening in the church, well, when her youth leader went to the Radcliffe Police Department in Kentucky, they didn't want to prosecute one of their own. So they turned it over to the Kentucky State Police. And when she did interviews with the cops, right, she was promised to be given copies of all the interviews because she's old, at least that, right? Right? You would think so, right? But that was not the case. That didn't happen. I wonder why. I wonder what would happen if that victim saw how the police were probably trying to protect this predator to the very end. And to make sure the police didn't face any kind of backlash, right? It was the police who provided the information to the news media outlets, not the actual victim. Make it make sense. And like I said before, she was promised to get a copy of the interview that she did with the cops, but she never got a copy of that interview. I wonder why. And this man would say stuff to her that honestly by itself deserves prison outside of the disgusting behavior that he engaged in, the predatory behavior. violating this young girl. I mean, telling her to lose weight. I mean, just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And the local news media, right? The news enterprise, which actually covers the Hill, right? They went by the police report. And nobody looked into the case deeper. Nobody cared. Nobody wanted to actually connect the dots of there being predators in law enforcement. And maybe these stories are a little bit too common for a short news blurb. Maybe these stories are a little bit too important for you to not talk to the freaking victim. Maybe these stories are a little bit too important for you just cover it one time. And even the way they covered it is so deceptive. Because if you check the headline from this news enterprise article here, it says here, man facing heinous charges. Man, you mean former cop, longtime Kentucky police officer, David Roy Love, right? Do you see how deceptive they're being? So if they got all their info from the cops, just like Susan said here, right? Then of course the cops wouldn't want you to put former Kentucky police officer like the New York Post did and like other media outlets did, right? Do you see the deception here? This is how cops are getting away with this stuff. I'm telling you, it is a widespread problem of police officers being predators. It is not unusual. It is not unheard of. Let's be adults about this and let's actually admit to the problem. Therefore, thereby, we can start looking for a damn solution. But hiding your hand, but just putting your head in the freaking sand, obviously is not fixing the problem, right? Right? So America, Blue Lives Matter, anyone who supports police officers, sheriff's deputies, law enforcement, at what point will you admit this is a problem? Because for the longest time, y'all called me a liar. You said I was exaggerating. Oh no, there's not this bad problem with predators in law enforcement. Explain to me, why is it all these independent news organizations and even big media, why do they keep reporting on all these stories then, if it's not a widespread problem? Denialism and rejections are not defenses for pigs. Don't trust pigs around your kids.